Hello, this is Jackie B. Peterson. I'm your host today on Solo Pro Radio, and I am the author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Bits for Solo and Creative Entrepreneurs. And what I work to do is help solos become more financially successful. You know who you are. You're struggling in those one-person businesses, whether you're an artist or a jewelry maker or a photographer, maybe a consultant. And over my years of working with multitudes of clients in that particular business model, I've identified 7 principles that, if you follow them, are going to help you to financial success. So hopefully you'll go to my website, bettersmarterricher.com, sign up for the free ebook, which outlines the 7 principles, and you can join our conversation on the blog. It's very active. And also sign up for our free newsletter. And if you're interested in pursuing this further, the book is for sale on the website, as well as my online course, which guides you through the website, and some of my classes also. My most popular one is called How to Charge What You're Worth. You know what a big deal that is. So today we have a great guest with us. Her name is Maddy Dychtwald, and Maddy is an author, speaker, and co-founder of Age Wave, the nation's foremost thought leader on population aging and its implications. Maddy is also a leading expert on the changing demographic trends that are shaping the marketplace, the workplace, and our lives. She has spent more than 25 years studying and forecasting lifestyle and market trends for older adults and baby boomers, and she has recently been recognized as an authority on the rising economic influence of women. We're going to talk a lot about that today. Her most recent book is Influence: How Women's Soaring Economic Power Will Transform Our World for the Better. I love that. So hello, Maddy.
Hi, Jackie. How are you?
I'm just great, and I'm so glad you could join us. And being a pioneer in women being in business, you know, when I started my first business back in 1976, I started a CPA firm, and there were like 4 women CPAs in Portland, Oregon. So the world has changed in that time, and I love to talk about this.
Yeah, it's a dramatic shift, really, and you've been one of the witnesses of it because it's happened right in front of our eyes.
Yes, I have. I've been a witness and a participant.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
It is. It's just wonderful to watch it change. And I have to tell you, I have a 7-year-old granddaughter, and I look at her and I think, you know, you can do absolutely anything that you can imagine. The world is open to you. And, you know, when I was growing up, they were telling us if we really wanted to work, you could be a airline stewardess, a nurse, or a teacher, and that was about it.
Yeah, and that's really changed. I mean, our generation, baby boomer women, are the first generation of women who really had the opportunity en masse to both go to school to get the education that they needed so that they could really succeed, and then to take that education and turn it not just into jobs but into careers. That's a huge shift.
It is a huge shift. I hope we're going to talk about more about that. But tell us a little bit as we begin. Talk about your background. What led you into the field of demographics?
Well, like many of your listeners and probably you yourself, I mean, I kind of got in a crazy way. I was working as an actress. I actually worked on a soap opera for many years, for actually 3.5 years. And when I was working on the soap opera, I became fascinated with the idea of high performance and living longer lives. And through that, I met my husband, who was very focused on that in his work. And then together, we really were interested in this high performance thing and how people were living longer and doing incredible things in the second half of their lives. So we're both big picture people, and we decided, you know, rather than just looking at that trend, let's look at the bigger trend, the fact that there are these demographic shifts taking place in the world right here and now that are completely transforming things. For instance, people are living longer, and there's more people in that second half of life, so it's changing the dynamics between the generations. Suddenly we have huge populations of older people, smaller generations of younger people, and that's just a total flip-flop from what we've seen throughout history. So we became fascinated with that, and here I am looking at demographics.
Oh, that's just fascinating. That really is. And you're you talked about that. You're the co-founder of Age Wave, and that's just become world known for helping individuals and institutions prepare for the aging of world populations. The end of the baby boom was in the 1964. So we've had a long time to get ready, but we all seem to be surprised by it right now. It's amazing.
Every step along the way. When baby boomers were going into school and schools had to go on to double shifts, that came as a surprise. When they were going into college and graduating college and everybody was having trouble getting jobs because there were so many of us, that came as a surprise. And now that we're seeing so many beginning what was traditionally considered retirement age, suddenly that seems to be coming as a surprise. So go figure.
I wonder what people are paying attention to. So what are some of the major changes that you and Age Wave are seeing unfold as baby boomers head for retirement?
Well, interesting. As we just pointed out, boomers have always been a huge force, primarily because of their big size. I mean, they're a huge generation. Now, I don't want anyone to think that all boomers are alike because they're not. But one thing we can say for sure is that they're aging very differently than their parents and grandparents. Overall, it's a very different looking generation when they begin to hit their 60s and 70s. And that's in many ways good news, in some ways not such good news. But the good news is that they're comfortable with the idea of reinventing themselves. They're comfortable with the idea of change, which, believe me, in today's world is really required. And they're not so anxious to retire at 65, which is a really good thing because they're going to be living a lot longer, and frankly, a lot of us just haven't saved enough to retire. Yes.
That's, as I feel what is happening is I work a lot with solopreneurs, and I think that solopreneurship is one of the very attractive ways for seniors and mature individuals, baby boomers, to maintain some or even create a business that they like because solopreneurship is so flexible. And we talk a lot about let's monetize your expertise. Let's take what you've spent, the last 35 years learning and turn it into something that makes money for you. And, you can do it either intensely or not so intensely. You can consult, you can write, you can teach, you can model, you can coach people, and all these different ways for people to earn money in a solo operation and yet not give up the freedom that should come with retirement. And some people are so excited that they finally get to do what they've always wanted to do that you can hardly hold them back. It's very exciting.
You're absolutely right, Jackie. And, there's two things I want to say about that. One is, we talk a lot in business about return on investment, ROI. I like to think about it as return on experience, ROE, taking your experience and turning it into something that's even more valuable a little bit later in your life. And the good news is that it used to be throughout most of history, people lived a very linear life that was very defined by gender and age. And so you hit the age of 65 and, baby, you were over the hill. Mm-hmm. Not so much anymore. People want to continue working, but as you pointed out so beautifully, they do not necessarily want to do it the way they're not interested in putting in 60 hours a week and punching a clock. They want to find something that maybe was a hobby and turning it into a career, or something that they've always dreamed of doing, and maybe working hard but changing the balance between work and leisure time activities, maybe adding in some education, making sure they have time to spend with family and friends. These suddenly become high priorities for people as they get older, because as you get older, you start to realize what really matters in life and put your emphasis right on that.
Yes. It's really pretty fabulous. It's a pretty fabulous time actually to be 50 plus.
It is. And it requires work. This stuff, a lot of people say, oh, yeah, what you're saying sounds great for people if they have the financial resources. Anyone can do it, but it requires a tremendous amount of focus and concentration and, really applying yourself to trying to turn something into a real career, even if it's just part-time or flex time.
Yes. Yes. My message, Maddy, is always the number one thing is to focus. And I was talking to a man the other day who is got about 4 different businesses going. And I said, that's an awfully wide variety of things that you are spending your energy on. How are you going to get any of them launched? And he said, I'm going to focus on the one that begins to make money. And I said, you have it all wrong. The one that makes money is going to be the one that you focus on. It's going to be the result. Money is going to follow your focus, not lead your focus. He said, I've got to think about that, because he's spread too many different directions. And that happens a lot with people. They get off in too many different ways, and then something doesn't work for them, and, they haven't figured out why. And I say, one thing. We've got to come down to one thing. Then I tell people I want them to create a deep and narrow niche. And then they've got expertise. And when they can become known as an expert, that's when they can make enough money doing what they're doing. If you're just another...
You're right about the money will follow, too. I mean, find something that you really are good at and care about deeply. And, this is advice I give to my kids.
I'll bet.
The money will follow. Don't go just for the money.
We had a radio guest on 2 weeks ago who is a life coach. He's a creative. He's a piano improv player, and they say he's turned in his wisdom into life coaching. And the way he said it was, "Money loves a party." And I said, I'm going to quote you because that's so true. If we create the energy and the excitement around it, the money shows up. He said, "Yeah, money loves a party."
Great, that's good advice.
Nice, good advice. So you've been focusing your own work on the rising power of women. And how is that happening finally when, women have been considered second-class citizens or even chattel for, millennia? How is this happening now?
That's true, yeah. Well, it's hard to believe it in a way, but, sometimes young people and even people who are a little older forget that our great-grandmothers that couldn't vote, and then we see someone like Hillary Clinton,
right,
who may end up being a president at some point, whatever you think about her politics. She's a powerful woman. You see that my mother couldn't, not my mother, but our great-grandmothers couldn't own property or even open a bank account. Yet
right.
Today, women make up more than half of working professionals. And we represent more than half of all stock market investors, and nearly a quarter of all wives today are out earning their husbands. So we're seeing women rise up at an exponential rate. Just to put it into context, if we go back in time just a little bit to the 1970s when you were just starting your work as you talked about before, back then, women were hardly getting by. They were making about a third of what men made on average. Today, that number has gone up so exponentially that in big cities, when women are being hired right out of college and men are being hired, if they're going for the same job and they have the same kind of background, the woman is bound to get a higher starting salary than the man.
Wow.
I mean,
that is quite a change.
In your lifetime, in your working lifetime.
Wow. Wow. I know that, one of the drivers for me to continue my study and gain a professional career, I had a CPA certificate, and I opened my CPA firm back in 1976, and one of the drivers for me to do that was to earn more money, because I felt like professional women could earn more money than, women just simply working in a career or a job. And, that did prove to be true, but I think I found that there were 4 women CPAs in Portland at that time, and I think now there's more than 50% of the profession is women. And, we're seeing that rise certainly in college professors and doctors and attorneys and, all kinds of areas where women have moved into these kind of careers.
That's exactly right.
What a change.
Opportunity, yes. It's a
dramatic
change.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's truly astounding, to the point where I have a daughter who's 26 years old. It wouldn't even occur to her that women do not have an equal opportunity to men. In fact, she looks around and I hate to say it, but she feels like guys just don't kind of get it, quote unquote. That don't seem to figure it out. Now, I keep telling her, look, give them a few more years. They'll figure it out. They're just a few years behind women in their maturation process, and I think that's really true. But, of course, there is something that happens to women in their 30s, by the time they hit their 30s, that, I don't know how to put this, but, they want to have babies.
Right.
They want to have babies more than men do oftentimes, and as a result of that, it does put a little bit of a wrench into their career track. It doesn't stop their career track anymore as it used to sometimes, but it does slow it down.
Yes.
That's just the truth. I mean, like it or not, and we haven't figured out how to deal with that as a country. Our policies are in the workplace and government policies do not support families. They're not family friendly, and so that's not good for women or for men. I mean, this is not about just women. It's about creating a good environment. And certain countries like the Scandinavian countries, France, Spain, other countries, Germany, they do create family-friendly policy that allows families to thrive and allows women and men to do better in their careers and still be able to spend time with their family. So
there's some models that we ought to be taking a look at as women move more and more into power positions in the workplace, it would seem.
That's right. Interestingly, a lot of third world fast-moving countries have gotten the message. For instance, Costa Rica, Brazil. I mean, these are kind of Rwanda. Rwanda is an interesting example because we know the horrific tribal wars that went on there back in the 1980s, and the country had to completely reinvent itself. And one of the first things it did is it created a system where women had to be part of the legislature. And today, in their political system, over 50% of all legislative representatives are women, and it's had a tremendously positive effect on family-friendly policy, on workplace policy, on a lot of different aspects of your society that you may not even expect that women in charge would make a difference in.
Wow. I know I've worked with people who are attached to the women growers, women coffee growers and landowners in Central and South America, and they found that when they pay the money to the women growers, the women turn around and reinvest in their communities, and they invest in education and taking care of their children and, building schools. And when they were paying the men, coffee growers, that isn't what happened at all. And, they didn't get the same level of community building. And I would imagine that same thing is happening in Rwanda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a UN study that was done on that very subject back, I think it was 2009, and what they found in this study was that 90% of women who earn income, they reinvested in their families and communities, just as you stated, whereas men, only about 30%. So
isn't that something?
It's a pretty big difference.
Well, I think that's why, that trend where the women will reinvest and not only support their children but their communities is one of the huge impact pieces we're going to see as women, say, in Rwanda are 50% of the legislators, or in your book you talk a lot about women creating new types of companies and new types of jobs and new relationships. And I think slowly as women begin to do that, it's going to be good for all of us.
Absolutely, and I think that that's the key message. I mean, sometimes we hear women and men say, "Oh, this is great, but what happens to the guys?" And I don't see it quite that way. I think it's a win for everyone, because when you can have men and women equally taking part in society, equally taking on the responsibilities, and they're huge responsibilities and stresses, I might add, of trying to figure out how to make this world work better, you're getting the best and the brightest out there rather than just 50% of the world.
Yes, right. You talk in your book, again, Your book is Influence, How Women's Soaring Economic Power Will Transform Our World for the Better. I have read about 2/3 of it, Maddy, and it's just absolutely wonderful. But you talk in your book about one of the reasons that this change is taking place is that women are getting more education. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, that's one of the drivers?
It's remarkable, and it's something that men might want to take into account for their own lives, but women have been given the message very clearly through their parents and friends and family and the government also, depending on the country, not so much in the United States, but in other countries, that an education is the ticket to success. And they've taken it seriously. So today you see women graduating from college in our country in much higher numbers than men. I mean, for every 100 women that graduate, only about 77 men graduate from college. So that's a scary statistic for men.
Yes.
But it's a great statistic for women. And and a lot of people will turn around and say, well, yeah, sure, college education, that's great. But, where the rubber really meets the road is in the further professional training, so law school, med school, engineering school, like that. But that's where we're seeing the most change. I mean, we're seeing women graduate from law school in equal numbers to men, from medical school in higher numbers, and even in equal numbers graduating from business school. So this is the future. We're going to see all the future professional and business leaders being both women and men, and it's going to have a great influence both on men and women and also on our overall society. It's going to change things for the better.
You also tell a story about what happens in large companies when women come on to the boards of directors and how the profitability of those companies increases. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I think it's exciting.
It's fascinating, and I wish I could say I invented this, but I didn't. Catalyst did a study, and then there's been many other studies that have been done that show that, okay, companies might throw a woman on the board, and that's just great. They think they're doing their thing, but frankly, that has no effect at all, none. It's tokenism, and everybody recognizes it as tokenism. Interestingly, if you put 2 women on a board or a senior executive committee, it has a negative effect. It somehow creates conflict on the board, which I don't even want to get into, but that's not a good thing. But if you put 3 or more women on a board of directors or a senior level executive committee, what you find is that it completely transforms the board and even has an impact on the company itself. The way it transforms the board is suddenly you see a lot more collaboration going on between board members, men and women, working together for the betterment of the company. Second, you see that the employees of the company see that the company on a strategic level is trying to make a difference, trying to involve more women, and both the women and men employees take that as a very positive sign. They feel that it makes the company more collaborative, and in fact it actually increases profitability. Now, it's a catch-22. We don't know if these are the innovative companies so they have increased profitability, or because they have women on their board, it increases profitability. But the thing is that having more women on your board goes hand in hand with increased profitability.
That's fantastic, isn't it? That's what wonderful news.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, for people who have talked about crashing the glass ceiling for a long time, when women go onto those boards, they really do bring something of value and a different way to look at the company. The way I've always said it, Maddy, is that the male perspective has been the end justifies the means, and the female perspective has been how we get there matters. And, we're not just talking about the end, we're talking about the means, and the means are extremely important. And I think that is one of the things that women do bring when, they come into a situation and have a voice. They say, wait a minute,
That's true. I would say that, what we're beginning to see happen, and I think this is fantastic news, is that a lot of women, what we've always called, quote-unquote, stereotypical women's values, like collaboration, like, collaboration. is the classic one. Listening, yes. Being that women have been in the workplace for quite a while right now and have had the chance to both mentor and influence both women employees and men employees, we're seeing that some men are learning those skills too. And
yes.
I think that's the beauty of the program, you know. Here you see suddenly women are gaining some more of the qualities that make men successful. Men are beginning to gain some of the qualities that make women successful. And that is, I think, just what we want to see happen.
We do, and it's no longer kind of sneered at as, soft skills. You know, we don't call it that anymore. We're talking about, we're learning, as you said, collaboration, team building, communication, relationship building. We're not bundling it all under one thing. And, you know, when I started my career, if we were talking about those things, we were calling them, okay, we've got to learn the soft skills. And, you know, like, oh, brother, here they go again. And I don't hear that anymore. I hear people eager to learn how to build better relationships. And anybody you talk to that says, okay, I'm trying to build my sales, and I know that everything has to do with relationships, building relationships. And I think, man, that's come out of the closet. You know, it's come a long way that everybody's talking about that now, and that tends to be one of those old soft skills, you know. And it's rising to the forefront as a way that we create a strong business is by focusing on relationship.
Yeah,
and it's come from out of nowhere.
Absolutely. Social media has helped that because social media, by the way, a very natural thing for women to do. It's sort of like a coffee clutch on steroids. I mean,
yes.
Think about it. It's just perfect for women. And, you know, men are having to adapt and really learn the skills that women are just perfectly suited for.
Yes.
Great media for women.
Wow. So I've talked about your book. It's a wonderful book, and I hope our listeners will, race to the store and get a copy. It's very readable. It's fun. It's full of examples. But in your wonderful book, it's Influence. You talk about 3 stages of economic power: survival, independence, and then influence. Do you want to talk a bit about those stages and what they mean and what they imply?
Well, for most of history, women have been in the place where they're at the stage of survival. And that's not really such a great place to be because, you're worried about just paying the basics, putting food on the table, putting a roof over your head. And you can't really get beyond that. Very uncomfortable place to be. And if you can visualize, it's a very visual kind of thing. So, think about it in terms of a triangle, and that's the base of the triangle. And so if we're looking at the world at large, we see most women are still at that place of survival. Now you go a little bit higher up the hierarchy in the middle of the triangle, and suddenly women are doing a little bit better. They suddenly have the opportunity to, do things like send their kids to private school. Especially in African countries where the school system is such that unless they're going to a private school, they're not even getting educated. So you get a chance to maybe live in a better neighborhood and maybe put fresher, better food on the table. So that's the next stage. And then the final stage at the top, the very tip of the triangle, what you begin to see is that world of influence where women can really move up the ladder to the place where they get to both not only materially have things that they want and need and the luxuries, a few of the luxuries that they may want and need, but they have an opportunity to influence the way the world works, to influence other women and to influence the overall society. And unfortunately, there's only a few women at that place in society. I mean, look around us, even in the United States. Although there's more and more women there, it's still not a huge number. And we want to see that number increase. So what we want to see is this triangle change shape and turn more into a square, if you will, so that we can see more women out of survival into a place of influence.
Oh, that's a great thing. It's very hopeful to me. So as women more and more move into positions of power and influence in the workplace and politics, the economy, so what kind of changes do you think we'll see as that begins to happen?
Well, we've already seen some, which is good news. I mean, what we see is that we have seen women politicians. I mean, even in our country, backward as we may be in the United States, there are women in Congress. Now, there's not as many as there ought to be. There's certainly not an equal number to men. But what we do see is that when women politicians are in office, they tend to champion policy that pertains to family and community issues, like, for instance, affordable child care and paid leave and sick days. And these are policies that benefit women on the surface, but families overall, and that's a good thing. Women also spend money. You know, when we see women who are in those positions of power and have the kind of money that they can get out there and actually spend money beyond the basics, they begin to spend money very differently too. They both support products oftentimes that are a little bit better for the environment, that have a better sense of family. I mean, family, I don't know, for some reason, it's not that men don't care about family. They do. They dramatically care about family. But women kind of put their money where their mouth is, and they really take actions that support family and family-friendly policies.
Yes. And I think part of that is what we were just talking about. I think that that view has more been day-to-day matters. It isn't just the, I was using a sports analogy. It isn't just the home run that matters. The base hits also matter. And I think women tend to carry that tune quite a bit, that day-to-day, week-to-week family support, supporting someone as they're growing up and moving into their career matters just as much as, say, being there when they, finally get to college. It's all those 20 years taking them to college that makes a difference. And I think women do kind of see the world that way. I think that's more of the women's view. Yeah. Well,
even when it comes to investing, I mean, it's really very interesting. The conversations that a woman will have versus a man will have with, like, a financial advisor. It's classic. I mean, a man oftentimes, and I think this is changing as women influence men, but a man oftentimes will talk just about the number. What's the number that you want to get to, or what number do I have? It's all about the number. A woman will talk about the whole thing differently. She'll say, I want to have enough money to send my kids to college. I want to have the money if something were to happen to my mom who's in her 80s and may need some assisted living care. I mean, I want to have the resources for that. And so it's the need that will translate into the dollars, but they talk about it in terms of the need, and it's generally family need.
Yes, that's very much true. So, this radio show's posted on the Solo Pro Network, and my own book, Better, Smarter, Richer, focuses on solos, and I find that many women and many boomers, encore entrepreneurs we're calling them, people over 50 who are starting their businesses in order to support their retirement, are really working with little businesses, and because they're less intense than many other entrepreneurial activities and have a lot of flexibility. So have you seen a trend towards women or boomers starting these little one-person businesses? I mean, do you see solopreneurship as one of the ways women are moving forward?
Well, yes. You're talking about two different but related trends, and one is that as adults get older, starting to hit the traditional retirement age, many of them begin to figure out, well, what do I want to do in the next phase of my life? And oftentimes that turns out to be, I'd like to work harder, not work harder, rather. I'd like to work smarter, not harder. And maybe that means, taking my expertise, as we talked about earlier in the show, and turn it into a consulting thing. And oftentimes that will be something that you could do out of your home and do in a flex time manner and still, take your best clients with you, if you will. And that's very popular. In fact, the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs in today's world are older adults.
Yes.
Which is kind of amazing. It's the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs. So we definitely see that going on. And that's a very smart way for older adults to keep both active, both physically and mentally, and also to keep an income coming in. And we know that that's really important, especially as people are living so much longer, especially, by the way, women. So that's where like the women thing meets, because women of all ages, whether they're having their children or, raising their children, or their children just left the home, or, never had children and they just want to be an independent entrepreneur, or they're this older woman that we just kind of referred to. Women have always gravitated towards trying to find a more flexible way of working so that they can combine both their personal and their professional life a little bit more seamlessly. And so we see that going on in huge numbers as well.
I see that as well also. I didn't tell you, but I do teach, and I'm a business advisor for the Small Business Development Center in our local area, and I have a program for solopreneurs, but I also am a business coach for a lot of business, and I see many women who come in starting small businesses and sometimes even bigger businesses, and are very interested in financial independence, financial security, not being dependent on their children, finding a way to do something that's flexible, and they're just showing up at our programs anyway in droves. And it sounds like your research is supporting that the fastest growing group of people starting businesses are older adults. I just see that a lot.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it, and it's a good thing. I think it's a great way to both be flexible and take some responsibility for your financial future, both of which are incredibly important.
And not wind up in your daughter-in-law's basement.
Oh, God, that wouldn't be such a good thing.
No.
The number one thing that people fear, according to the studies that we've been involved in, the number one thing that older adults fear about living a longer life is being a burden on their families. Yes, that loss of independence, and being a burden. That's a horrible thought, to think ahead that might be happening. And you want to do everything you can to not end up there.
It drives lots of people to find new ways to make money and new ways to be in careers, and it's a big motivator for people.
That's
so,
right.
Maddy, along with what we're talking about with women and financial expertise, I've interviewed a lot of financial experts on this program, and without a doubt, they've all expressed concern about women not knowing enough about making, investing, and understanding money. Is that something you found in your research as well?
No, there's no doubt about it. Women have done a great job of figuring out how to earn. They have done a far less better job of learning how to invest. And I would say that's true for men too, but right now we're focused on women. There's no doubt about it that is a place that we need to put a lot more emphasis on. I would suggest to anyone who's listening, if they can create some kind of awareness program or education program for teens and young adults to teach them, especially women, how to take control of your money. And, a friend of mine who's a hedge fund guy said to me, hey, it's really simple. Just teach them the idea of compounding, and they'll get it. Well, maybe that's true, but, I would say overall women have a long way to come. And remember, women outlive men. So women are living longer than men, so it's even more important for them to invest for their future.
Oh, yes, that is so true. So are younger women as well gaining more money savvy than they used to? Are they, do we find that there's a generational thing here, and are younger women, having more understanding and confidence with money? Is that happening?
Well, I would say they have more confidence in spending money. I think they have a lot of confidence in terms of both earning and spending. They're great at it, and they're really good at doing the kind of research required to make smart purchases, and those are great steps to take. But in terms of investing, it's a world that feels very foreign to women in particular, and I would say that it's the exception rather than the rule for a woman to be savvy enough to invest. And the first step that all women who are employed can take is to, say yes. Check that little box when you're going through your employment papers, and there's a little box, do you want to invest in the 401ks? Check yes. because that's a great place to get started. But it's just a start. And the whole idea of starting to invest when you're young is the compounding thing is true. I mean, the more you invest when you're young, the better off you're going to be when you're older. On the other hand, it's never too late to start.
That's true. It really is never too late to start. I do a course I call How to Charge What You're Worth, and I know there are many people, women particularly, who are down in the survival end that you talked about on the spectrum. And so the concept of having any money to invest is, when you're in the survival area of that spectrum, is really, really almost unthinkable. So like you, I'm trying to move people beyond survival, into independence. And so one of the things I find again and again and again, particularly with women, is that they tend to give away what they do and what they know, or be very nervous about charging enough money. So every time I teach that program, I've got a lot of people, that are lined up to say, okay, I can do this. And in fact, I have to tell you, Maddy, in Portland, they tell me my middle name is Raise Your Prices. They call me Jackie Raise Your Prices Peterson.
Well, I think that's really, that's a good place for people to start. You're right.
It is a great place for them to start.
There's no way you're thinking about investing in your future. But, what the savvy financial professional will tell women, even at that level, is if you have $1, take a nickel or a dime and put it aside for the future. Begin. Because you're not going to miss it.
Right. Begin, no matter where you are, begin. It doesn't, it doesn't have to be huge, and, no matter how small, it's going to have an impact for you, and you'll get into
putting it into a, to get started into some kind of an account, a CD or something, just to get started. But I would advise all women to think both, to earn for today and earn for tomorrow, because that's not a message that we hear enough of in our society, and it's really going to be a huge downfall for us, especially for women living longer than men, taking off time from work to care for aging parents, to care for their own children. Women are the shortstops in our society, and as a result, their income is affected.
Yes,
so you're right.
It is.
Charge more and take a piece of what you're charging more and save it for the future.
Absolutely. I get after a lot of people, and say, are you saving some money? Have you put any money aside? Have you begun your retirement program? And, there's so many people who have just been very casual about it and have said, well, I'm just going to keep working, into my 70s. I'll work until I drop. And I'll say, first of all, you're very likely to live to be 90 to 100, and you might work through your 70s. You might even work into your 80s. But when you're in your late 80s and your 90s, you are not going to want to be working. And you're going to need money to support you. And this is what we're talking about. And, their eyes get big. And, so I think that conversations that seem to be beginning to happen, and I'm certain that it's been driven a lot by the research done by, Age Wave, is that there really is this longevity bonus, that there really is these, 25 to 30 years beyond the point where traditional retirement takes place, and we need to be thinking about those years. I'm beginning to see some TV commercials about it, and, beginning to see some conversations about it, and, it's that reality that needs to sit with people.
Yep. That's absolutely true. The number one, again, Age Wave is involved with a lot of primary research, and what we've discovered is, like you and I have been talking this whole time, baby boomers, men and women, both feel like, oh yeah, I'm going to work well past the age of 65, so I'll have money as I go along, no need to save. But what ends up happening is they get a surprise attack.
Yes.
They get a health issue that stops them from working, or their mom gets really ill and they have to stop working. Something comes up that takes them out of the workplace, and then they're in a very precarious situation.
Yes, that does happen. I know I talked to a group of boomers recently, and I said, I understand. I'm part of this generation too, where we said don't trust anybody over 30, and here we are.
Over 30.
well beyond 30. Everybody laughed, and I said, and I think that mindset kind of prevented people from planning for the future because nobody thought they were ever going to get there, and here it is. So
that's right.
I know that many of our listeners are women, and if they've been as inspired by me, by our discussion, I hope they have been, and I'm sure they have been. What are some things that they can do now to reach out and make a difference? What are some of the things women can do?
Well, that's a great question. And you know what? Everybody can do something. But, just to tie this up with what we were just talking about, the first thing you can do is to help yourself. Foster your own financial knowledge and expertise. It's a must. Take a class. Join an online financial community. There's that, Citigroup has that company, Women in Company, where you can learn about managing your own money online. There are things that you can do, so that's number one. Number two, learn the facts to support women of all shapes, sizes, and flavors. And again, that's really supporting, family and work life so that women and men can both work as they raise their families. I mean, I can't tell you how important that is because I know that I struggled with that when I had my kids, trying to work, trying to build a family, and trying to make both of those things happen at once is very complicated. And we need to support the kind of policy in our government and in our industries that will make that happen. And it'll be better for us, and it'll be better for the world at large. So that's two things. Another thing, the third thing I would say, is support women who run for office. It doesn't matter if you're a conservative or if you're a radical liberal, whatever. There are organizations like the Susan B. Anthony list if you're more conservative, Emily's list if you're a little bit more liberal, where you can get involved. And maybe it's giving $1, or maybe it's just getting out there and making phone calls on behalf of a particular candidate. We need to get more women into office so that we can have more equality, so men and women can stand side by side ruling our world. And, as a last thing I would say, each and every one of us can mentor future leaders. I mean, volunteer to help young women. Join Big Sisters or the Girl Scouts, or just somehow find somebody in your company, if you work for a company, where you can mentor them, support them, be a role model for them.
Oh, boy, those are all good things. Those are all good things, and those are all good things that are not beyond the reach of anyone. Those are, you don't have to be making a lot of money to do any of the things that you're talking about, so I'm going to feed them back. Help yourself, she says first, and I totally agree with that. Secondly, learn the facts to support women in family and work life, support the policies that make that happen, so read and find out what you should be supporting. Support women who run for office, amen, sister, and mentor future leaders. We can all do those things. So, Maddy, you've been a wonderful guest today. I've enjoyed our conversation immensely. This has been a huge amount of fun. So if our listeners would like to learn more about you or get hold of your book, how can they get hold of you?
Oh, easy. There's three ways. One is, influence, how women's soaring economic power will transform our world for the better. They can just go to order that on Amazon. I mean, it's the easiest thing to do. I have a Twitter feed. It's called @GoInfluence, which is pretty straightforward. I have a website, which is my name, which is incredibly difficult to spell, but it's www.maddydychtwald.com. And my company has a website also, which you can link to mine. And the company website is ageways.com, www.ageways.com, and that's age like getting older, wave like a wave in the ocean. So that's a little easier than MaddyDychtwald.com.
That's okay. So do you have any closing words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us?
I would just say that, women all over, don't forget how powerful you are. And, don't be afraid to use that power and influence.
Oh, that's just fabulous. Well, Maddy, I've just, as I say, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Listeners, I've just had a great conversation with Maddy Dychtwald. Don't forget her book, Influence. And I bought a copy knowing Maddy was going to be on the show, and it was reading that I could hardly put down. It was so exciting and well-written, easy read, full of good information and wonderful stories that will inspire you to take some action in your own life. And I also want to remind you that I'm your host today, Jackie B. Peterson. I'm the author of Better, Smarter, Richer, 7 Business Principles for Solos and Creative Entrepreneurs. And I hope that you'll go to my website, bettersmarterricher.com, take a look at the free ebook, join the conversation on the blog, sign up for the free newsletter, download the book if you'd like to read further. The book is a fill-in-the-blanks workbook because what I want you to do is change your thinking. Get rid of the old messages that you're running around in your head that are preventing you from having the financial success that you really want and you deserve. It's a fill-in-the-blanks workbook. We do study groups on the book. We also have an online course with the book. And there's some online classes. The most popular one is how to charge what you're worth because I know we don't do that well enough. So I look forward to joining you again next week on Solo Pro Radio, and have a great summer, and we'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye.
Bye.